Prabhupada disciples, and professionally so qualified that if I'll be just listing, her credentials, it would take half of the class, including PhD in education and masters in NLP and many other things. But as you can imagine, she is extremely busy person, and both in professional and in his own worlds, including some work for the Governing Body Commission. And so it's a great honor and pleasure that she actually made exception and agreed to teach for us. And not only that, she is going to teach 3 courses in 6 days, and pretty much, with the exception of little material, these are all premier courses which she designed just for this purpose, just for you. And so she spent nearly a month designing those courses. So that's why let's very warmly welcome Mother Urmila. And just a short announcement that Bhakta Dmitri, he got water for everyone, mineral water if you want in a bottle, on the top of that water in the corner. But a humble request, if you could please recycle your bottles to reduce the plastic waste in Sridham Mayapur. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. So this particular seminar I designed specifically for this audience. We're going to be doing this all of today, all of tomorrow, and Tuesday morning. Then Tuesday afternoon, we're going to do a seminar on metaphors. Oh, I should get my papers out. I'm going to be doing a seminar on metaphors, which I have taught before, though not very often. All of you should have received a lot of printouts, plus, these are all mine. All of you should have, that's okay. All of you should have received a lot of printouts, and unfortunately, there were some files that didn't get printed. So you should have received those as electronic files. There is, I think, 6 clinics, 6 of them that are listed as clinics, or 7 perhaps. Let's see. Yeah. 6 of them that are listed as clinics. That's what we're going to be doing this afternoon.
Tell me which ones do we have to...
Yeah, clinics 2 and 3 you only have as electronic files. So please bring an electronic device. I would personally prefer, if you have a laptop or a tablet, something other than a little tiny phone, that would be best. If you only have a little tiny phone, then sit next to somebody who has a larger screen. Now that's going to be mostly for this afternoon and tomorrow and the next day, where you're going to need to reference electronic files, or else you really won't be able to participate because we don't have everything printed. The only thing that I'd like you to reference for this morning is something called the framework, which you only have electronically, which you should have just received. And any of you who are not regular part of the Academy, please request to Narahari, Maharaj or Narahari, to get a copy of those electronic files, which again you will need for this afternoon. So the basic plan is that this morning we're going to be talking about the theory, and then for the rest of the time we're going to be putting the theory into practice. So we're not going to be doing much interactive this morning. This morning it's mostly going to be me talking. And you looking at cool things on the wall. And then after that, it's going to be you working. I do have a little video to show this afternoon. And the next session, which is going to be the 27th to the 29th. So the day of the 27th, I'm going to be doing a seminar which I developed for the SPT. Actually, I worked with Kanteya Prabhu on this, and this is on what's called environmental scanning. So I've taught that, I think, either 2 or 3 times to ISKCON leaders. So you're going to get that. That was the result of 4 months worth of work to do all the research and put that together. And that's basically about how to read your environment so that you can capture trends as they're emerging rather than being a late responder. Then we're also going to have a seminar on those 3 days that I put together specifically for this academy, something I'm very, very excited to teach. I've always wanted to teach to leaders who wanted to take Krishna consciousness to the world, and that is on policy implementation. And that seminar is going to be December 28th and 29th. And that seminar particularly comes from some of my PhD work. And it's basically about how to implement policies actually. So something goes from an idea to reality, and how to implement a policy, not only so it actually gets implemented, but so it doesn't cause results different than what you intended. And then at the end of the 29th, I'm going to teach something from the end of these 3-day sessions. I'm teaching something from NLP. Mara said, teach something from neuro-linguistic programming. And the end of the second session also, but that is something that I've taught widely all over the world, what's called well-formed plan, which is also, again, how to make plans that are likely to translate into reality. In those other 3 days, we're also going to have one session about how to inspire people. And that is a seminar that, again, I've taught widely all over the world, something we taught in North Carolina as part of the 7 Laws of the Learner to the whole community. So that's kind of an overview of what we'll be doing, and we're going to be mostly doing interactive. This is going to be mostly workshops, fun shops. Now, in order to participate in the participatory activities, you're going to need to have a lump of clay. If you don't have a lump of clay, you're not going to be able to shape it, because we're going to be shaping our lump of clay. So while you're listening to me blabbing this morning and watching my pictures this morning, I would like you to be thinking about, if you don't already have something, what's the change that you want to make in the world? A change in an existing organization, a change to a new organization, a change in something. I mean, you could think about a change you want to do in your own life for yourself, but primarily you'll be able to participate best if you're thinking about some sort of change, whether it's something completely new or something, or a small or a medium or a large change in something that already exists. And without your having that in hand, you're simply not going to be able to participate, because I'm going to say, take the change you want to make, and now what about this? And how are you going to deal with that? And how are you going to, do you understand? Right? Take your lump of clay, and where you're going to put your nose, and where you're going to put the ears. And if I don't have a lump of clay, then it's going to be, you're just not going to work. And if you don't have anything any kind of change you want to make, then make something up that you can practice with. You got to bring something with you that you can practice with. Now, on the other seminars, 27th, 28th, 29th, for the 28th afternoon, you're also going to have to bring, starting 28th afternoon, you're also going to need to bring a different lump of clay. That's going to be a little bit more specific. Some sort of policy you'd like to implement. That's a little different from a change, although it could be similar to that. You might be able to try it with the same lump of clay, but you might want to bring a piece of that. You follow? Like you might have a big change and you want to have a policy in relationship to that change. Again, if you don't come with something to work on, you won't have anything to do. I'm not going to assign it to you. You understand? Here's the change that you want to make in the world. No, I'm not going to do that. So it has to be something that comes from you. So by this afternoon, some change that you would like to make, and by 28th afternoon, some sort of policy that you would like to have implemented. A court of policy does imply a change, but it might be on a much smaller level. Is there anyone here lost at my speed of English? Be honest, please. Anyone who is just dying with my English speed? What about you? Yes, you are, and you're Japanese, so you're very shy to say. Anybody else? How are you doing? My speed. Are you doing okay or not? So. And you? Not very good. You're fine. Okay. How are you doing with my speed for translation?
I'm struggling with terminology, but everything else.
Okay, you've got a vocabulary problem. What are you translating into?
Russian.
Into Russian. Do we have a different translator? I can change speed. To change vocabulary is a little harder because these are advanced topics.
Well, maybe if I will get this material,
that will help. Okay. Can I make a deal with you? If there's a word you don't understand, will you raise your hand and ask me? Okay. So I'm going to put my brakes on and drive much more slowly. But the problem with my speaking this slowly is that a lot of you may tend to fall asleep. That's the trade-off. So I don't know what to say. If I'm too slow and you feel sleepy, just stand up or something. Okay. Okay, so this presentation is based entirely on a book, and I did actually work with the authors in putting this presentation together. They gave me some materials that they don't generally share. I couldn't get the focus any better. I tried. Oh, look at that, a little better. Look at, oh, he's a magician. Jai. I should always take you with, I should have a little one of you I can take with me whenever I use a project. I was trying. Thank you, Contea. I actually worked with the book authors. They gave me some material that they don't generally share, and in exchange, I shared this presentation with them, and they were really happy about it. Okay, can all of you at least start thinking about some change that you want to make? Does everybody have one? Some change you want to make somewhere? In ISKCON, out of ISKCON, in the Russian government?
You can ask for the show of hands.
Who here has a change they want to make somewhere? All right, those of you who don't, can you just think for a minute of something, because this is going to work a lot better if you've got something in mind. Now, this is talking about getting other people to change. Can you apply these principles to getting yourself to change? You certainly can. But this presentation is about leadership, and it's about leading other people into change. We should mention that this presentation will apply even if you're not in a leadership position. So even if you don't have money, manpower at your disposal. Now, whenever we're trying to get other people to change, how is my speed now? Is it okay? How is my speed? Okay for you? Yes? Okay. We always have to keep in mind, and this will be true when we're looking at other things I'm going to be presenting, that everybody has free will. Therefore, there is no technique, there are no principles that you can learn that will get anyone and everyone all the time to do what you want them to do. If you are looking for that, good luck. Krishna doesn't have it. Okay? Krishna does not have some system to get everyone to do what he wants them to do all the time. So please do not be looking for something like that. It's not possible. Whether you're working with your children, whether you're working with your friends or an organization, there's nothing that says, you do this, people will change the way you want them to change. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at how to make it easier. How to make it easier, right? Instead of smashing the walls. You know? How do I make change easier? How do I increase my chances of success? That's what we're looking for. The particular model, this is not, by the way, the only model for organizational change. So I had a semester course at the doctoral level in organizational change. There's many different models and theories of organizational change. This is not the only one. I like this one because it's very simple to understand, it's very simple to implement, it's very elegant, and it very much coincides to what we learn in our Krishna conscious philosophy. So that's why I've chosen this particular model. I would suggest that if you plan on being a change agent, that you study further into different practices and techniques and theories of organizational change and not limit yourself to this particular model. So this model is based upon the mind. And that the mind, as we know, has thinking, feeling, and willing. Yes? We are familiar? That Srila Prabhupada talks about that the mind has thinking, feeling, and willing. So there's the rational thinking part. So this part is reflective. You know, what about this? What about that? It's very deliberate. It's very analytical. Thinks about all different possibilities, all different choices. Then we have the emotional feeling aspect of the mind. This is instinctive. When people say my gut feeling, they're talking about the emotional or feeling part of the mind. Not only is it very instinctive, but this is where we experience all pain and pleasure. Haribo, Prabhu, nice to have you with us. I just should mention, Prabhu, that other than for this morning, you're going to need to have some materials. So you could get those electronically from Maharaj and then bring some, hopefully, bigger screen device to look at them.
And maybe those whose emails I don't have can write them on pieces of paper and pass them forward. So I'll forward the materials while the class is going.
Okay, that would be very good. All right, then we have the willing aspect of the mind. This is what causes us to actually do something. This is where, okay, we're going to have this behavior. Now, all change involves some change in behavior that we're looking at here. We're looking at changes in behavior. Sometimes when you want to change things, you're looking just for a change in attitude. I mean, sometimes when I give a Shastra class, the only thing I want people to change is an attitude or a mood. Does that make sense? Like, let's say I'm talking about kirtan or japa. I may only be looking for my students, my participants, to have a change in mood or attitude that's not going to be in any kind of measurable behavior. But the kind of change we're talking about in this seminar is some kind of measurable behavior, something you're going to see, hear, touch, smell, etc. in the outside world. So ultimately, change has to come, it has to come to the willing part of the mind. So to give an example of how these work together, so let's say you say, well, I think I'd like to wake up really early so I can exercise, before I take a shower. You know, I want to get up at 2:30 or 3. So that's the thinking part of the mind that says it would be really good if I could wake up at 2:30 and I could exercise, get all sweaty before I take my shower and go to Mangalarti. Then there's the feeling part of the mind that when your alarm rings at 2:30, it says no. Because the feeling part of the mind is what feels pain and pleasure, and you're feeling all this pleasure in your nice little bed. And, thinking about getting up at that time, it's going to hurt. And then the willing part of the mind is considering, how difficult is this going to be? If I want to exercise at 3 in the morning, I want to go outside and it's dark and maybe I'll step in some cow dung and maybe a jackal will bite me and I don't know if that's going to work out. So this is the willing part of the mind. It looks at how difficult or easy is it going to be. So the authors of this book have made an analogy to help us understand this, and that is an elephant, a rider, and a path. So the rider is compared to the thinking part of the mind. The elephant to the feeling part of the mind, and the path to the willing part of the mind. So whenever we're dealing with trying to change other people and groups of people, we're dealing with a rider, an elephant, and a path. We want to direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and clear the path. We want to direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and clear the path. Now, if you have electronically the paper of the framework, if you have that paper of the framework, it would be very helpful for you to have that up on your screen, hopefully a big screen. If you don't have a big screen, it would be helpful if you were sitting next to somebody with a big screen.
Is this how to make a switch?
I don't remember exactly the name of the file, but it's one that you got last night or this morning. Switch framework, yes, thank you. I know it says framework in there. It's a chart. It will look like a table or a graph or a chart. Is that up? Do you have that? No. I see.
His Brothers, the Switch Framework PDF. That's the name of the file.
Yeah, it'd be good if you could actually download that to your hard drive so you don't have to depend on the internet. All right. If you don't have that now, it's not crucial. As I say, starting this afternoon, having the materials will be crucial. So if you don't have the materials, please make sure you get it on the break. If you don't have that right now, it's fine. But you might just want to have that for reference. Okay? All right. So when people fail to change, the fault is almost always in the elephant. Of the rider, the elephant, and the path, the elephant is the one who mostly drives change. And the elephant refers to what part of the mind? Feeling. The emotional part of the mind. Right? This elephant, it's a lot stronger than the rider. It's a lot stronger than the rider. And it's usually kind of lazy. It's interested in immediate gratification. For example, your rider may say, I'm not going to eat any cake at night, and your elephant sees the cake at night and eats it. Right? So that's basically this. The emotions tend to drive the behavior more than the rational mind. All right, this is going to be our keys this is on that, this should be on that framework paper. They're going to need that starting tomorrow. What they're going to need for this afternoon is anything that says clinic on it. Maybe somebody could put this up on the wall in some place where it would remain visible. Somebody, do we have any blue tack person? Are you the blue tack person? Yes. Okay. And what is your name? Your name is not Laura. What is your name? What? Yuri. Okay. I mean, you don't know. I don't know. I was just at an interfaith meeting, and there was a priest named Maria, so... You never know. Okay, so this is our main framework, and then we're going to have sub-areas to this framework, but this is the main framework. If you want to lead a change, you want to direct the rational mind for clarity, you want to motivate the emotional mind for desire, and you want to shape the path and make it easy. Okay, let's say you get people on board intellectually, philosophically, but you don't have them on board emotionally. Then you get understanding, but you don't have motivation. And I'm sure we can think of times when this happens to us. You know, I understand something, I know I should do it, but I don't want to do it enough to do it. Yes? Have we all had this situation? I kind of want to do it, and I know I should do it. I'm convinced intellectually. I have no problem with being convinced intellectually. I could even convince somebody else intellectually. But my motive isn't strong enough to change my behavior. So this is what happens when you motivate the rider and not the elephant. It's a very common mistake. Let's say you motivate the elephant, but not the rider. Right? So this is where you do have the desire to do it, but you don't know what to do. And this also happens all the time, isn't it? I want to do this. I want to do this. It's really important to me. I would do anything to do it. What do I do? How do I do it? Then sometimes we know what to do. We're clear. We're convinced. We have the motivation. But it's just too hard. There's too many obstacles. As soon as we try to do it, there's one obstacle after another, after another, after another. Yes. So we do have it. I just didn't get a copy. Okay, I thought that was possible. I thought it was possible that you'd actually printed it and just not given me a copy. Here, there is one file, though, that I'd forgotten to send on time that you will only have electronically. Yeah, when the path is difficult. You know what to do, and you want to do it, but it's so hard to do that you don't do it. Do you have things like that too? You know what needs to be done. It's not that you're lacking clarity on what needs to be done. You have a great desire to do it, but it's just too difficult. You keep running into obstacles, you keep running into problems, and so the change doesn't happen. Right? I was just actually talking to a devotee like that since I came to Mayapur. That, I'd like to do this and that in Mayapur, and I know what has to be done. I want to do it, but I run into administrative management roadblocks. I've talked to 2 devotees since I came to Mayapur, actually, that told me that. You know, I go to this authority, and they say, no, you have to go to that authority. And they say, no, you have to go to that authority. No, you have to do this first, and you have to do that first. And no, we don't do that. And we don't do that over here. And we wouldn't do that. right? Two devotees who came to me. They know what to do. They want to do it. And they're just blocked, 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 blocked. And so the change doesn't happen. All right, looking at the writer or the thinking part of the mind. So on the positive side, this part of the mind can make very good decisions for our benefit. But the problem with the analytical part of our mind is it can tend to spin its wheels. It can tend to become so analytical, so wrapped up in pros and cons and different choices that it fails to reach any kind of a decision. So the rational mind can understand what's for our benefit more than the emotional mind, isn't it? Isn't that a fact? Yes? Yes. But the rational mind can be indecisive. I mean, I'm thinking of someone I know quite well who's extremely logical and rational. This person can really figure out good decisions, but has a very difficult time making that choice. You know, they can see 100 different, well, what about this? Let's list all the pros and cons and all the pros and cons and interesting. What do they call that? Paralysis by analysis, right? And you have these think tanks with Prabhupada called the planning commissions, that they just go on and on and on and on and on. We could do this and this might happen. If we do this, this might happen. And what about if we do it this way? And then if we do it that way? And what about this thing? I've also worked with devotees, like they ask the same questions for 10 years. You know? Well, that's too hard. I have one good friend who's been in the movement like 30 years and hasn't taken initiation. And, well, why not? He says, well, you know, I've got to pick the right guru. Like, you know, Prabhu, you're going to die uninitiated. And, you know, I got to make sure that, you know. And so this is we get this paralysis by analysis. And yet, at the same time, this is the part of the mind that tends to be able to understand what's actually good for us. Okay, then our elephant. So the downsides of the elephant or the emotional mind is it tends to sabotage the plans of the rational mind. This is the biggest problem with the emotional mind. We make all these great plans with our intelligence, and our emotions just bypass it and just smashes it. Well, I'm going to treat devotees like this, and I'm going to behave like not going to be offensive, and I'm not going to be critical. Why did you do that? You know, it's like, oh man, I can't believe I did that again. You know, I'm going to have all my rounds done by 7 o'clock with full attention, and oh, I think I'm going to check Facebook. Oh, I think I'm going to have a piece of burfi, or, you know, and this is the elephant. Now, the good sides of the elephant is that this is what gives us power and determination and drive. This is where all the drive to do things come from. As we said before, it's the emotional part of the mind that really is going to be making a change. See, I could talk fast enough to keep you awake, Prabhu, but then I'd lose like 3 people in the audience. I don't know what to do about it. Sorry. It's just it's like this trade-off, you know. Sorry. If you can somehow try to stay awake at my half speed. Otherwise, if I see people falling asleep, I will try to wake them up. Now, if the rational and the emotional parts of the mind are not in sync, we become exhausted. It's just exhausting. Right? Whenever people trying to make a change and they believe that they want to do something, but they don't have the drive or the motivation to do it, if we're having this battle between our thinking and feeling, it's pretty exhausting. And who do you think will win most of the time? The emotional side, yes. Now, again, most of the time when we want to change something, we're talking about changing behaviors. This is from another book, by the way, a very excellent book about habits, how habits are formed and how habits are changed. I'd be happy to share this entire presentation with you if you like. Just email me and I'll send you a Dropbox link. So most times when we want to make a change, we're talking about a change, obviously, in something that already exists, so there's some sort of habit going on. And whenever we want to change in a habit, there's some automatic resistance to changing a habit. Anything that's become a habit, whether on an individual level, a group level, an organizational level, is something that's gone out of the purview of conscious decision making. Do you understand that? If something's a habit, it's something I do more or less automatically. Yes?
I heard to change the habit is taking 28 days. Do you agree with that?
There is certainly a lot of evidence that changing a habit takes between 21 and 30 days, yes. To make it solid. Yes, there's certainly evidence for that. You have to remember whenever there's research, any behavioral research, take it as somewhat fluid. I mean, I'm a social scientist, and anytime we research the behavior of human beings, keep in mind they're doing what they call a random sample. So this is a little side topic, but it may be of value to you because you will probably look at psychological, sociological research in your life. Any research in the soft sciences where they're looking at human behavior, they're taking a random sample. Maybe they're taking 50 people, maybe they're taking 200 people. And the idea of the sample being random is that it will accurately represent the population at large. The problem with all social research is that when you take a different random sample, you may not get the same kind of representation. So research in the social sciences is highly subjected to what's called replication error. So when you do some research in the social sciences, you research 200 people, then somebody repeats the experiment with a different 200 people, somebody else repeats it with a different 200 people. Often what happens is the results gradually disappear. So do keep that in mind whenever it comes to social science research. There's a lot of, this would be a different seminar, but there's a lot of problems with, again, I can give you copies of this, so.
We'll just share on WhatsApp.
Okay. I'm happy to share everything I have here. So just do keep that in mind. Always keep some healthy skepticism with any sort of empirical research, even in the hard sciences, but especially when it comes to the soft sciences. And I would always, if you can, look back at the original research and see, what was the sample size, who was being studied, you understand? Look at what we call the methodology of the research, and especially look at has this research been replicated? I mean, out in the scientific world, the idea is that all research gets replicated, and it's only through replication that you counter individual bias. This is a sidetrack. If any of you are interested, just chant Hare Krishna in your mind. So that's the concept. But the reality is that when there's groundbreaking research, it gets published in the peer-reviewed scientific journals. And when you're replicating the research, they're not so interested because it's not new. So replicating research is not so likely to be published. Therefore, people are not so likely to do it. So just do keep that in mind. Having said all that caveat, it does seem that it takes some days, about 3 to 4 weeks. I mean, my own experience is that I've seen habits change within 2 weeks. Working with kids, of course, kids may be a lot more malleable, but what I've seen with kids is about 2 weeks. But psychologically, if you allow for 3 or 4 weeks for a habit to change, you're doing something we'll talk about at the end of this presentation. You're allowing for failure, and you're giving it some time. So anyway, when you want to make a change, oftentimes you're changing something that's already a habit. and a habit has gone into automatic pilot. One time my family moved to a new house that was a 10-minute drive from our old house. And a week or two after we moved, I was driving back from the store, and I drove to our old house. When I was about 2 minutes from the old house, all of a sudden I realized, where am I? What am I doing here? I don't live here anymore. So this is the power of habits. And what you see here with habits, there's some kind of a cue. There's something that triggers the habits. It may be a time of day. It may be an emotional state of mind. It may be a particular activity, a particular person. Then that cue instigates some sort of behavior which has a certain reward. Now, the point of bringing out this idea about habits is that to break habits generally requires a lot of self-control, because habits are on automatic pilot, like my driving was on automatic pilot. In order to change my habits, I had to intentionally, purposely, consciously remember that when I get to this particular landmark, I turn right instead of go straight. So it requires some sort of deliberation and some sort of mental energy until the new change becomes a habit. Okay? Any questions on this? Is just the overview. Any questions on this basic overview? Yes.
Did I not correct if you mentioned that the same change circle happens as an individual, also in a group?
Correct.
Could you give some example of a group habit change?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. In fact, we're going to give you lots and lots and lots and lots of examples. If it's not enough, then we'll come up with more in our participatory. Thank you for that question. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
Do you think it's possible to work on more than one habit at the same time? Or is it
Yeah, if they're connected particularly. Or if one of them is minor. I wouldn't usually try to work on two major changes at the same time. That is a very good question. Yes?
Why is it that the emotional mind is so much powerful than the other?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, my own guess, and this is my own guess, goes back to spirituality. That we're much more, that we as a spirit are much more driven by emotion and desire. You know, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. But it's more I desire and I feel, therefore I am. The main symptom of being alive are desires and feelings, not thoughts. And if you think about living entities that are in very covered bodies, like a seed of a plant or a grown plant, so the tree out there definitely has emotions and desires, but I'm sure it doesn't have very many thoughts. But definitely has feelings and desires. You know, I want warmth, I want light. I believe, I understand from Shastra that the emotion and desire aspect is dealing with a much more fundamental sense of existence than is the thought process. So I'm not sure if that's the right answer, but it seems like a reasonably correct answer to me. Yes?
I'm just wondering this. So here we have the concept of the mind, thinking, feeling, will. And how that corresponds to the, also in our, we have the intelligence. That's like to put it. It's off the mind. And when you were mentioning that first one, direct, the writer, think a little bit of the description as intelligence.
Of the intelligence. Let me think about that. I'll think about that and I'll get back to you this afternoon. Thank you. By the way, I really like it if people ask me questions I can't answer. Yes. We could even arrange like to have some Maha sweets or something, you know. I'm not kidding, you know, like have some Maha sweets for anybody who asks me a question I can't answer.
They might get, like diabetes or something.
They're that good, huh? All right. Yes.
Can I just put my 2 cents in with his question?
Okay, sure.
Well, when I first saw the whole elephant and rider thing, I thought that the rider represents the intelligence because we learn that the mind, there's all these ideas flooding the mind, and then it's up to the intelligence to pick through and, okay, that's a good idea, don't do that. Whereas there might be a bad idea and then the intelligence is in charge of, no, don't do that, that's a bad idea. So you kind of taking control of.
That's certainly one way you could define it. We have in Sanskrit these two words, the buddhi and mana, and as part of the subtle body. I mean, in one sense, narrowing this down to the mind is probably not entirely accurate. In one sense, we're probably looking at the whole subtle body, because you'll see when we look later on this morning at the emotional side, we're going to be looking at aspects of the false ego. We're going to be looking at aspects of the ahankara, the identity. So, you could divide it a little differently. But generally, the way we explain this, buddhi and manas and ahankara, is that the buddhi has a general vision and guidance, the intelligence has a general vision and guidance, and the mind is doing and accepting. It's the mind doing the accepting and rejecting, based, hopefully, on the guidance of the intelligence. And the intelligence is forming plans based on the identity as given by the false ego. So you could also analyze it like that. Okay, so are we ready to go on to our direct for clarity? How to use the rational thinking part of the mind, which may very well be connected with the intelligence. It may be a soft boundary and not a hard boundary. All right, and those of you who have the, do you have the copy? Could you give me a copy of that? So as you see on your framework, in each of the three areas, there's three sub-areas. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do, or one of the three things we're going to do, is look for bright spots. Look for something that's working in the direction of the change we want to make. So there was a researcher who went to Vietnam with the idea that he was going to help the health of the Vietnamese people. And he found in the villages that a lot of the babies and young children were suffering from severe malnutrition. So what he did in order to help the situation was to ask, are there any babies or children in the villages who are healthy? Are there any babies or young children in the villages who are healthy? And then he found out what's the difference. Now, first of all, he had to eliminate the healthy children who were getting some sort of resources from outside the village. Maybe they had wealthy grandparents who were sending them gift boxes or something. So he had to eliminate anything that was not typical. And then he looked at the typical examples of the healthy babies. And he found that for the malnourished babies, their mothers were feeding them 2 large bowls of rice every day, plain rice, putting the large bowl at 2 different times. They had 2 meals. Each meal had 1 large bowl of rice. And the children could eat as much as they wanted or not eat as much as they wanted. With the healthy babies, they were getting 4 meals a day of small bowls of rice with sweet potato greens in them. And the mothers were feeding the children, where they were actively feeding their children even when the children were sick, which was something that was not common in the village itself. So they saw there were already people in the village who were doing something that would affect the change that they wanted to do. Is this clear? Yes, they looked around, we want to make a change, we want to get healthy children. Who in the same environment is already getting that change? So then they brought together groups of 10 women, some of whom were using the healthier approach, and they had the women who had the healthier habits train the women who didn't. So it was a locally sourced solution. People are much more open to something that comes from their own culture and their own environment. They were already motivated. I mean, any normal mother wants her child to be healthy. You didn't need to worry about the emotions and the motivation, but they didn't know what to do. So here they're being given some very clear understanding of what to do. From this, he was able to scale up in Vietnam in general, and although he was just one person without much funding or backing, he was able to enact a big change in the health of the village people. All right, here's another. That's one way to find a bright spot. One way to find a bright spot is you look around and you see who's doing it right. Who's doing it right? I mean, just like in ISKCON today, there's a lot of talk about how much are we making devotees from people who are not ethnically Indian. Yeah, it's one of the big conversations in ISKCON. How do we get more people to practice Krishna consciousness who are not from ethnic Indian backgrounds? Yes, is this a big conversation? First time you've heard that. Well, it is a big conversation. Because in most of the world, other than in Russia, we're getting most of our members from Indian communities. Or in places where there just aren't any Indians, you know, like Kazakhstan or something, I mean, you know, Poland or Siberia. Japan, there's practically not any Indians. And we looked around and see, well, who's being successful? Who's being successful at introducing people to Krishna consciousness when those people don't have some background in Hinduism or some background in Indian culture? Who's being successful and how are they being successful? What are they doing? And you want to look, of course, at similarity of circumstances, right? If you're trying to do something in one place and you look at somebody who's successful in a vastly different circumstance, then that's not scalable. So this is one way to find bright spots. Who, in a similar circumstance, is getting the kind of result or something close to the result that you want? You know, if you want to think about how to get clean water to the people in Vrindavan, then you may want to look at other Indian villages where people have clean water. And you probably want to look at other Indian villages in the UP. Like I was just in Andhra Pradesh, in Tirupati, in Tirumala. You go up to the Tirumala mountain, and everything is spotlessly clean. You know, basically, you're not wearing your shoes anywhere in the whole village. After walking for an hour shoeless outside, the bottoms of my feet were cleaner than they are in most people's houses. With some devotees, I said, look at your feet. There was no rubbish. We saw one beggar who was there illegally. There weren't stray animals. Everything was well organized. And you look around and say, it's India? But if I were to take that model and say, let's copy paste this to Vrindavan, I've got a different government. The UP government, the under government is quite different. And then the other big factor that's different is that the Balaji temple is fantabulously wealthy. And there's one central temple for that whole community. It's a whole community based around one temple. In Vrindavan, Prabhupada says there's 5,000 temples. So I've got circumstances there that just don't translate. Is that Clear to everybody? So I look at that model, and it's got too many factors that are different. Yes?
And how do you find which factors are important? Because copying three things is harder than copying just one thing, that is adding greens to the rice.
Yes, that is true. Part of that was going to be the ease of doing it. You know, if I think like at Balaji Temple, you've got one central temple that's collecting fabulous amounts of money daily, and then that's distributed and used. So that one factor is going to make copy-pasting it very difficult. You know, and you're never going to have one central temple in Vrindavan, nor would you want to. So that's that. You look at that one factor and say, oh, that's not really copyable. But that's a good question. I don't think that there's just an algorithm for the answer to that, but that was very thoughtful. All right, now let's look at another way of finding a bright spot. This is a question that you can ask people. Suppose you went to bed tonight, you slept well, and sometime in the middle of the night while you were sleeping, a miracle happened, and you woke up and the change was already in place. What's one small thing you would notice that would tell you that the change has already happened? So that's the first question that you ask. If you went to bed tonight, the change happened miraculously in your sleep, you woke up, it was already there, what's a little indication that you would notice in the morning that you'd know, oh, everything has changed? Now, suppose somebody gives you a negative, and we'll look at this more when we look at the afternoon of the 29th. No, the afternoon of the 30th, sorry. We'll look at this more then. So if you get an answer that's in the negative, well, this wouldn't be happening. Then ask, what would there be instead? What would you find instead? What would be there in its place? Like if someone said, well, I'd wake up and there wouldn't be trash all over the road. What would there be instead? You know, so if you get an answer from people that's in the negative, you ask that question, what would that be instead? Again, we'll be doing a whole practice session on that kind of question on the very, very last day on the 30th. Now, here's an example just in having a change with one person where a therapist asked an alcoholic, you know, if you woke up in the morning and you weren't drinking anymore, what would you notice? And he's like, well, I don't know. Can you think of anybody you know who doesn't drink? And no, all my friends are alcoholics too. Well, give it a try. What might be different? Well, instead of getting a drink, I might go to the library. Maybe I'd look at the newspapers. And then, well, how would your day be different if you went to the library? What you're trying to do is find some bright spot in that person. Now, once you find that theoretical bright spot, then you say, when was the last time that happened? Okay, so those two questions have to kind of go together. You know, what would be the small indication of the change? And can you think of any time when that actually happened?
They say, yes, it was 20 years ago when I was a little kid.
That's fine. Look for what the circumstances were. You know, if someone says, well, what would happen would be I'd go to the temple authority and they'd say, yes, I'm the right person and I can help you out. When's the last time that happened? Well, you know, it happened about 5 years ago with so-and-so and so-and-so. So this is another way of trying to find a bright spot, trying to find something that worked. So again, you're looking for some better results with a similar or the same set of circumstances? Someone else? You're looking for someone else who's gotten a better result? Or when did you get a better result? So if you're trying to effect a change in an organization, you can look for a different organization or a part of that organization that was having a result closer to the change you wanted. Or you can look at that group of people and try to find out, when did you have a different kind of result? When did you have some circumstance where you were getting a better result? Now, why do change agents not generally work this way? Why is this idea of looking for the bright spots so revolutionary? And this is because the analytical part of the mind looks for problems. We're geared to look for the negative. If we want to make a change, our tendency is, what are the problems and how do I fix them? That's generally where the writer, the analytical mind, goes first. There's not clean water here. What's the problems? Why isn't there clean water? What's causing the dirty water? How do I fix those problems? Instead of, is there anybody who has clean water? Did anybody ever have clean water? Are there any examples of anyone? We look, what's wrong with the situation? Now, by the way, we tend to do this in general. It seems like it's a human tendency, is when we want to make a change, we look for the problems. So this is a change in mindset. Instead of looking for, here's the problems, here's the causes of the problems, have a positive mindset. What are the things that indicate solutions? So instead of what's broken and how can we fix it, which is, again, the main question that we usually ask. Instead, we would ask what? Well, that still might be a solution to the problem. We want to ask what's what?
What's not broken?
Let's put that positive. What's working? And how can we replicate it or do more of it? What's working and how can we do more of it? It's a different way of looking at the world. Now, this next thing is, it's something that I found to be absolutely, completely true and just revolutionary. This is a picture of David and Goliath, for any of you who've never read the Bible. So Goliath was this big giant who was brought down by a little shepherd boy with a slingshot. We tend to think that big problems have to have big solutions. That if it's a big, complicated problem, and I was just somewhere, I often, in so many different places, I very rarely can remember what geographical location I was in for this or that. But I was somewhere where I saw a sign that was about, when should you go for help with the problem? Well, if it's a small problem, fix it yourself. If it's a medium problem, ask for advice. If it's a big problem, bring in some assistance. That's not necessarily true. Big problems can often be solved with very small solutions. Sometimes a millimeter change can solve a huge problem. I don't know why, but I know that it's a fact. If you think about two parallel lines, right, and if one just shifts a millimeter, pretty soon it's all the way over there. You don't always have to have a big shift. And this is one of the principles behind finding the bright spots. When you find what's working, it may be a very small difference, like putting some leaves in the rice and having 4 small meals instead of 2 big ones. Who would think, and actively feeding the kids, who would think that such a small thing could take kids from sickly to healthy? You'd think, oh, we have to bring in a whole medical team, we have to, right? We have to give intense education to the people, and we have to do this, and we have to do that, and we have to do the other thing. And since I've understood this, I have been amazed at how doing something small can often have a big impact if you know what the small thing is. If you get that small thing right. Yes?
My observation is that, to the most part, our organizational culture in ISKCON is that we know it all kind of attitude and, thinking that, if we are not there, the world, will stall. And so, what is required to kind of change that mentality in practical terms? I'm sorry, if this is the question that winning the sweet ball.
It's interesting that a movement based on the Shikshastika would have that sort of mentality. But I know everything. I mean, that's a little incongruous, isn't it?
Well, I'm Krishna's representative, and Krishna knows everything.
Oh, well, there you go. That works. Okay, I'm going to be really bad here. And you can have that as the switch you're going to work on as your lump of clay. You can bring that as your lump of clay to the other sessions. How to get a humility culture in ISKCON. I mean, we have a lot of fake humility culture in ISKCON. We're really good at that one. You take the mat. No, 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 you take the mat. I'm not good at anything, Prabhu. I don't know anything. I am useless. So we're really good at that, yeah? I think within a couple weeks, you kind of get that. Okay, we're going to go on to the next thing. So we've looked at find the bright spots. We're going to go on to scripting the critical move. So again, this is all with directing the writer. This is all with dealing with the analytical, logical mind. So there's a lot of evidence that when we have too many choices, we don't do anything. When we have too many choices, we don't do anything. If there's too many things to buy in the store, you don't buy any of them.
Or it's too much free space in the basket.
You don't know where to sit, yeah. Yeah, we can get overwhelmed by having a lot of choices. Okay, well, I know I want to do this, but there's 100,000 ways to do it, and which way do I choose? And, it really can become very, very overwhelming. One of the examples that they give in the book is people who were slated for surgery for a particular medical condition. And then they found out that not all of the medications had been tried because they like to try medications before surgery. So if patients had tried all medications except one, the doctors were more likely to have them try the medications and delay surgery. But if they had tried all medications except two, they were more likely to just say, let's go for surgery. Do you all understand that? So people, they were ready to get surgery, and the doctor found out, oh, there was a medicine we didn't try yet. We could try that before we cut the patient open. So about half the doctors, if they found out that the patient had not tried a particular medicine, they would go for the medicine. If they found out the patient hadn't tried 2 different medicines, they were only about 25% likely to have them try medicines and not have surgery. Now, you'd think logically it would be the opposite. You'd think people would say, oh, we have 2 chances of having this person avoid surgery. Let's try both of them before we try the surgery. But the opposite was true. When they saw that they had more choices, they were less likely to take either of them. And we're just talking about 1 or 2 choices. So when people see a lot of options for change, they're likely to do nothing. And the same if things are just very unclear, if there's just a lot of ambiguity. You know, they just don't know what their choices are. The rational part of the mind gets kind of paralyzed in a fog. I just don't know what to do. Okay, we have a story here of an effort to try to get people to eat healthier and to reduce fat in their diet. Now, telling this story, I am aware that Srila Prabhupada said that the fatty part of milk was the healthiest part of milk. So, just keep that in mind. Anyway, these researchers, what they wanted to do was they wanted to get people to reduce fat in their diet, and so they decided they were going to aim at one thing, getting people to drink low-fat milk. And they realized that what people are going to eat and drink depends on what they purchase. So instead of trying to change their eating behavior, they tried to change their shopping behavior. And they did advertisements of when you're in the store, buy the low-fat milk. Now, they also involved the emotional part of the mind because they showed that, 1 cup of full-fat milk is equal to like 3 pieces of bacon fat or something like that, to try to get people to go, ew. But they aimed at that one change. And they were very successful. The sales of low-fat milk tripled. Now, such thing is in contrast. What the U.S. government does is they have this food pyramid when they want you to eat healthy. So they have this food pyramid. And it's kind of confusing because the way they've done this pyramid is the little triangle at the top is supposed to be the things you eat the least of, and the section at the bottom is supposed to be the things you're supposed to eat the most of. By area. But the problem is when we think of a pyramid, we generally think that the top of the pyramid is the best. So it kind of confuses us. Are those things in the top, those are the best things, and the things at the bottom, they are the worst things. Also, it doesn't tell you how much to eat, and it's so much information, right? So then the government tried to have this pyramid where they tried to have these different colors, going up and then showing by area, the bigger areas, what you're supposed to eat more of, and the little. But this is also, if you look at that and you want to try to make a healthy diet based on that, it's too much information. What the authors of this book call true but useless. It's just so much information, so many choices, you just kind of give up and say, well, we can't do anything. Whereas if you just say to people, hey, just buy low-fat milk. You want to be healthier? Buy low-fat milk. One thing. Then they're much more likely to make that change. Here's another very interesting example. It was of a town in America that was basically falling apart. The young people were moving out. Businesses were moving out. There was hardly any tax money to keep the government going. The town was going to die. So there was a meeting of the young people who were left in the town, and they did some research, and they asked around, and they figured out that if the residents spent 10% of their disposable income at shops in the town, instead of going outside to shop, that would generate enough tax money to rebuild the town. And they were able to get the people on board. This is, again, something where people were already emotionally invested. They were already eager. They just needed to know what to do. The people ended up spending more than 10% of their disposable income, and gradually the whole town revived. So again, this is what we call script the critical moves. Give people a script. This is what you do. Figure out what's critical. Figure out what's going to make that little thing that's going to make a big difference, and give people a clear direction. You can take this one step. Yes? Yes. Then the last point under directing the writer, and then we're going to take a break, is to point to the destination. So scripting the critical moves is telling people what to do in the process, especially at the beginning. Like, what's the first step to take? And this is, where are you going? Now, what I found also from a spiritual perspective, and I tell people this all the time, is all you need to know is, where are you going and what's the first little step I need to take right now? That's actually all you ever need to know. You don't need a complete map from here to there, and in fact, I don't even think that's possible. I think that that's the kind of thing that shifts, and I also very strongly believe that often we have to take a step before we have the knowledge and the insight in order to know what the next step is. That often it's like that, and I've had this experience numerous times. But to know where you're going, and this is a destination that should be worth it. Although here we're talking about directing the writer, it should be a destination that has some emotional impact, where people really care about it, something you'd want to celebrate. Where are we going to? So what's the first step you have to take? What's a simple step you can take? And where are you going? What's this exciting, celebratory place you're going? I was talking with Maharaj about visioning for a society. Something I've done with whoever ISKCON leaders are open to it, is sitting and saying, you know, if all of Spain or all of Brazil or all of Lithuania or your city were in Mahaprabhu's movement, what would it look like? Getting this big celebratory vision. This is the goal. You can think of it like a postcard. Right? A destination postcard. This is where you're going. Now, you remember that the writer can get stuck in analysis, right? So you can say, okay, here's the tables, here's the graphs, here's all the things. And then the analytical mind will start going, well, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is, and what about this problem, and what about that, and this will happen, and that'll happen, and the other thing. And having a destination postcard, having a picture of your ultimate destination, tends to stop that, and it pushes the analytical mind to do something amazing. It pushes the analytical part of the mind to start thinking about how to get there, instead of whether or not we should go at all. And what are all the problems? It switches from the problem mindset to the solution mindset. Okay, here's the vision we want to go to. Oh, what am I going to do to get there? It's using the strengths of the analytical mind. Right? So it's like you have a choice about how to use this, we could call rider's energy. So the natural tendency of the analytical mind is to think, should I go this way or that way, or do it this way or that way? And you redirect that energy to, there's where you're going, how do we get there? There's where you're going, how do we get there? Okay, here's a couple of examples. A teacher who came into a first grade class that's about age 6 years old. The kids hardly knew the alphabet, the really disadvantaged kids. They were starting like basically 2 years behind where we would expect them to start. And the teacher gave them a destination postcard. By the end of the year, you're going to be ready for third grade. Now, usually at the end of first grade, you're ready for second grade. And the teacher said, by the end of first grade, you're going to be ready for third grade. And these were the kids who were 2 years behind. Another example given was of an oil company. Now, oil companies dig a lot of holes that don't produce any oil. And they waste a lot of money doing that. In this case, the destination postcard was no dry holes. 0. Never dig a dry hole. Now, of course, they weren't able to get to 0 dry holes. But as soon as they put that as the destination postcard, then all of the engineers involved started thinking about how to minimize waste and how to only drill once they were going to be very certain of hitting oil. So they automatically started thinking how to do this. Is this clear? They just start, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to have no dry holes? You know, I'm thinking about when Srila Prabhupada said to the press, 17 books in 2 months. And immediately, well, how do we do that? Okay, so just to summarize this particular part, and then we're going to take a break. So on the plus side of the ledger, our writer is a visionary. So the analytical part of the mind is willing to make short-term sacrifices for long-term payoffs, which is why there's such a battle with the emotional part of the mind, because emotionally we want some immediate happiness. The analytical part of the mind is a clever tactician, and if you give this analytical part of the mind a script, it can follow it perfectly. Right? But there's a limited amount of willpower, there's a limited amount that our analytical, rational mind will fight with our emotions and desires, right? They end up getting the better of us. And our paralysis in the face of ambiguity and a lot of choices. So investigate and copy the successes, the bright spots, give direction for the beginning of the change, which is scripting the critical moves, and direction for the end of the change, pointing to the destination. So we're going to take a break, let's say 15 minutes till 12:10. Okay.